Sorry about that. So, time for another nerdy rant. Um, Looking at my analytics, I see that the majority of my audience right now is overwhelmingly middle-aged males, which is fine. That's perfectly fine. I'm still going to do this rant though. This is on BS college degrees. I have talked about this in several videos, mostly with my friend when we're driving along, um, because he's still in graduate school, and I'm going to be returning to graduate school at some point. And also there are some younger viewers that catch my videos every once in a while, so this might help them out. Or for the older folks, they might be able to pass this information along to people they care about. So this is something I've been wanting to talk about for a long time because I hear so much bad information put out online. Okay, especially in the red pill content space. Um, so first of all, I disagree with all these real red pill content creators who look at the stats and showing that men are overwhelmingly not going to college as much anymore and telling them that they shouldn't. They should focus on their careers and stuff like that. First of all, how do you propose they do so in this day and age without some sort of advanced degree or trade? We live in a society built on credentialism. So without those very credentials, it's going to stymie any effort for you to become a high income earner. Um, Kevin Samuels pointed that out as well. Where he and I disagree with is on this very subject. What are BS college degrees? Okay, but yeah, I thoroughly disagree with red pill content creators telling men they don't need to pursue college degrees either because of the politics pushed in higher academics or because they think it's a waste of time where men should be building themselves. Like, how do you propose they do so in 2024 without credentials? You can't get ahead anywhere without credentials nowadays. So that's that's just bad advice. And for the black red pill content creators, especially, that's horrendous advice because that black people need those credentials to make it into the middle and upper middle class space. And I'm going to touch on that as well, why that is the case in a credentialist society like ours. But like I said, this is going to be the truth on bullshit majors. Okay. So, first of all, having a 4-year degree is awesome. And young people should definitely pursue it if they have the cognitive ability to do so. If not, maybe a a trade would be more your speed. And there's nothing bad about that. I'm I'm not saying trades are less socially prestigious in the minds of some people. That is women. They think so, but a lot of the trades make as much, if not more, than a lot of the white collar jobs. Again, shout out to the late Kevin Samuels for pointing that out. The blue collar Henrys. Henry was his acronym for high earning, uh, not rich yet. Um, and he had the blue collar Henrys and he had the white collar Henrys, which he called I forgot what he called the white collar Henrys, but you can be a high income earner, blue collar or white collar. So for guys, that shit doesn't matter. The people who look down at that either have ovaries or they pretend they do. In any case, so the thing is, there's always been BS college degrees. The thing was, up until like 40, 50 years ago, it really didn't matter because most people didn't go to college. So college was just a sign of social prestige to to say that you've gone to college. So it didn't matter if you had a degree in something like communications as opposed to something like electrical engineering. You were you were the you were the SHIT just for the fact that you had a degree. Now, what happened around the early 80s and so, once a lot of people started entering college, was the elite. And we're not talking about conservatives versus liberal here. A lot of people want to do that. We're not doing that here. We're talking about the wealthy elite versus the lower classes. The wealthy elite saw college degrees as basically their a thing, their plaything. And once they started seeing the lower classes going to college, they wanted to separate themselves from these people. So they made college way more. They supported efforts to make college way more expensive, um, for financial aid to cover much less of the spread for going, and they started favoring certain majors over others for the sake of prestige. And this is where the whole bullshit major comes in. And then it flipped. So I'm going to talk about that as well. So around 40, 50 years ago, to say you had a prestigious degree, you couldn't have something stupid like communications and stuff like that. Those became the majors of people who were considered not serious students, and it became a self-fulfilling prophecy because a lot of people who aren't serious students do flock to those degrees where there's much less academic rigor, like communications and criminal justice, stuff like that. And people who've gone to college know that it's a running joke that you can almost tell someone's race by by what major they're in, or with the family of majors that their college is has. So generally, someone's probably white if they're in humanities, social science, or business, th- that sort of stuff. Someone's probably Asian, Indian, or African if they're like in the science and engineering. And someone's probably black if they're taking a bullshit degree like criminal justice, communications, and African American studies. So I don't mean to reinforce stereotype, but this is something we've known on college campuses for like over 25 years, that you can tell you can predict someone's racial background by their major. Now, of course, that's just a general stereotype. It doesn't fit everyone, obviously. That's that's why it's a stereotype. But it works more more enough that you can imagine. So going back to those earlier times. So back then, again, there were always these bullshit majors, but no one considered them bullshit back then because mostly only the wealthy and people who were lucky got to go to college. And so it was just a sign of prestige for them to have a college degree. The college degree became the entryway into the professional managerial class, or the PMC, which is basically saying that was your key to the upper middle classes through your college uh, experience. Now, again, once 40, 50 years ago, once more people from the lower classes started entering college, like I said, they made it harder, as far as they made it more expensive to go to college. They provided less student aid, and they they started making it a source of prestige what sort of degrees you got. So the STEM majors were reinforced even now, which is ironic because now the wealthy elite have gone back to getting bullshit majors intentionally, because it's to say that they can go to college and not need it to get ahead in life. They're just doing it because it's prestigious to go to college. So that was the flip I was just talking about a few minutes ago. I'll expound on all of this because I know I'm ranting. So once I entered into the college space in the late 90s, early 2000s, you had this whole thing about bullshit majors and this and that. And to be honest, it is partly the college's fault that they don't let people, let students, that is, undergrad students, know um, how successful they may be with certain degrees as opposed to others. So that is partly on the school's fault. But in defense of these colleges and universities, higher learning was supposed to be just that, higher learning. It wasn't. People now treat colleges like trade schools, especially people from the lower classes. They see it as their entryway into a meaningful um, higher income job. But unless they do the work to get there, it doesn't matter. So even if you have a bullshit major or whatever, nowadays you need to be going. You need to, um, do these little volunteer positions. Um, what's the word I'm looking for, guys? I can't, I can't remember it. But when you um, when you do these work for these companies and stuff as unpaid interns. That's the internships. So basically, you have to do internships to get those jobs. It's not enough to get the degrees, and a lot of these people coming from underprivileged backgrounds don't realize that they have to do these unpaid internships to get these jobs. Another problem is a lot of them can't afford to do unpaid internships. So again, this is another way of gatekeeping for the elite. They send their kids off to college, let them do these unpaid internships at firms through their friends and family, because there's a lot of nepotism and cronyism in this sort of thing, and then they end up landing these jobs after they graduate. Now overseas is different. Like when I'm in the Philippines, my in-laws and my younger in-laws and stuff, they were in college, um, and my wife, they part of their part of them finishing their degree is an internship. The internship is part of the last part of their degree. So that is a part of their degree. And so that even with 4 year degrees, they are licensed in that field. So if you take in psychology and you plan on going into a helping field within psychology, like counseling or something like that, you're doing an internship for it, and you're licensed in doing so once you complete your degree. They don't do that here. Here, you're supposed to take that onus on yourself to do these internships to thereby land a job once you leave college. And, some colleges do make you aware of that. Your guidance counselors usually would advise you to do so, depending on, what you plan on doing with your degree, if anything. Okay. Um, but yeah, nowadays you need to do those internships, particularly those unpaid internships, because most of the most prestigious firms don't pay their interns, which is a fucked up thing, but that's a subject for another day. But you need to get those internships, whether paid or unpaid, and most of them are unpaid for the lofty jobs. Um, and then again, I agree. I disagree again with a lot of the content creators in the red pill space when they say unless you're going to school for a STEM major, you shouldn't go at all. That's just patently bad advice. One is the obvious thing that not everyone has the capacity nor the interest to do a STEM field. That's the that's the first problematic part of that. The second part of that is not every STEM is equal. People talk about STEM when really the only thing they should be talking about is um, engineering or mathematics, because those are the only things that's going to guarantee you a high income job out of the STEM field. Most of the STEM fields are science majors, and you can't do anything with that at the undergrad level other than be a research assistant. Those are not high paying jobs. Those are beginning level jobs. So I know. One of my degrees was a science major, biopsychology. So you can't do anything with that at a bachelor's level. So the whole thing about you need to do a STEM, no. If you want a guaranteed high income job coming from the STEM field, is either engineering, computer science, or mathematics. That's it. All those science majors are useless unless you're going to graduate school for it to be a actual working scientist or a or a teacher or professor. That's it. Like, people need to stop that whole worship of STEM. Third is that there are some majors outside of STEM that are just as high income and rewarding. Four is the mistake in the red pill space that everything outside of STEM is a bullshit major. So they're they're extending the scope of bullshit major to a bunch of things to which it didn't originally apply. So I want to get into that. So for me, I think the best definition of a BS major is a major which you don't need to take to get into that very field that you're studying. The best example of that is criminal justice. You don't need a criminal justice degree to get into any field within criminal justice whatsoever. There are some fields within criminal justice that you definitely need a 4 year degree, but they don't tell you what degree you need to get. If you want to practice law enforcement at the state, at either the state, local, or federal level, there's no requirement that you need criminal justice degrees to do so. If you want to get into law, if you want to study pre-law, criminal justice is not required. So that is one of the best marquee examples of a bullshit major that I would tell people not to take. Unfortunately, a lot of black people take it, and I think a lot of them take it because they feel that the criminal justice system is unfair to black people. Well, it is, but it's not just unfair to black people. The criminal justice system is just unfair, period. It's just that too many black people fall afoul of it. That's another subject for another day. But simply taking a major in it is not going to prepare you for a career field in it, because you can literally take any major or none at all and get into a criminal justice field. That is a marquee useless degree. Um, Other bullshit majors. Anything that pretty much ends in the word studies is a bullshit major. Family studies, American studies, African American studies, gender studies, bullshit majors. They you can't tell you can't tell me one major that ends in studies that's not a bullshit major. They if if they weren't bullshit majors, they wouldn't be studies. Okay. Um, Communications. That's one of the big ones, right? Because I've already mentioned it a few times on this rant already. Communications, again, like criminal justice, is a bullshit major because you don't need to study that major to get into that field. Unless you are doing it at a graduate level, you don't need a background in communications. That's it. So, and I harped on STEM majors again. They are bullshit STEM majors because if you are doing an undergrad science degree, say in biology, um, geography, chemistry, yeah, psychology, my field. Well, I did biopsychology, but anyway, any science major that you are not going to do at least at a master's level or higher is going to be a bullshit degree because there's nothing you can do with a science undergrad degree other than be a research assistant. That's it. Other than that, generally all 4 year degrees basically prepare you for entry level management. That's it. The degrees do exactly what they were meant to do back in the day. Prepare you for entry level professional managerial positions. So you can get any entry level management position after getting a 4-year degree nowadays, unless you do the extra work to get an internship in the specific field that you want. So again, those un, those unpaid internships are the key to getting into that field that you actually want, as opposed to ending up being a manager at Walmart or something like that. Sorry. But again, the funny thing is now that everyone harps on STEM majors, and the problem is the lower classes always catch the trend like 20 years behind. So back in the 70s and early 80s, when the elite were all switching to doing like pre-med and pre-law to become doctors, lawyers, and also accountants, the lower classes didn't catch on to that until like the later 80s, 90s, 2000s. So you'll predominantly see um, a bunch of biology pre-med students being predominantly um, African folks, Caribbean folks, some black people, maybe a few Asians, but um, people who are in the know that pre-med and pre-law are passe nowadays in academics. Most people have moved on to the information science fields, like computer science, uh, data science, stuff like that, or engineering. But like I said, the lower classes, when they go to college, their advice they're getting is 20 years behind, if not more. Like no, like the whole pre med and pre law thing is not the it's not the best road to success. You're talking about being in school after you get your degree, another like 5 to 10 more years, and then have to pay off all the debt before you can start uh, like acquiring wealth. Yeah, not the best path. Like I said, that was the thing in the late 70s, like in the 70s, early 80s. Not now. The elite now have gone back to taking the humanities majors, liberal arts majors, social science majors, which I just pointed out was overwhelmingly white people. Um, I can tell you psychology specifically is mostly white women. I know, I know that specifically. Um, my one of my other majors, philosophy, is mostly white men. So I was meeting people in that higher social stratosphere because these were the sort of majors they were taking now, as opposed to the practical degrees in STEM. So the red pill content creators don't know what they're talking about when they're telling people either don't go to college or only do a STEM major. That's just bad information. No, the thing is, go to college, do what interests you, because what interests you is going to be the best path to having a good career. But make sure you're interning while you're in school so that you can land those lofty jobs. Interning, especially unpaid internships. I'm gonna keep harping on that. Um, but um, like I said, the Black Manosphere does their audience a disservice telling them they don't need to go to college, because the more educated a group is, the more social prestige and the more soft power they have. And people in the Black Manosphere that don't understand that is because they never held such soft power. They've never been around those folks. They come from working backgrounds. Some of them are former felons and stuff like that, and they just don't know. Some of them were athletes, so they never were serious about academics, because we all know that the student athletes tend to take the dumbest majors. Like my school, for example, they had a geology class. It was a lab science, because everyone had to do at least one lab science course, but it was dumbed down so that lesser students could pass it. So it was we all jokingly referred to it as rocks for jocks because all the athletes were would take that class to get their lab science requirement for their major, and all the student athletes at University of Maryland for the football and basketball programs they have their own guidance counselors. They don't use the regular guidance counselors like the other students do. They have their own, and they have been able to set them up with taking the dumbest courses on campus, like the Rocks for Jocks, which was a geology lab course, which wasn't for geology majors. It was for non-geology majors. So they're typically not the best people to get academic advice from now that they're like doing podcasts and stuff like that. So where does that leave us? So one, I would say to summarize all this, when people were first attending college in a, up until the very late 20th century, it didn't matter what degree you got because most people didn't get college degrees, only the wealthy and the elite did. Two, once there was this distinction between bullshit majors and non bullshit majors, um, it changed because the wealthy elite always wants to separate themselves from the lower classes. So where it was emphasis on pre-law and medicine and pre-medicine, then it became on STEM, and now they've switched back to doing liberal arts and social sciences, which are considered the bullshit majors. Also, the STEM majors, which are harped on now, half of them are still bullshit majors because you can't do anything with an undergrad science major. Only things you can walk out of college with and be almost guaranteed something good is doing something in information technology or engineering. That's it. Uh, However, regardless of major, you need to look at internships while you're still in college to make sure you can land those positions with those firms or companies or government agencies that you want to get into when you graduate. And like I said, that might not be possible for everyone to do unpaid internships. If so, you can find paid internships, or you can get an unpaid internship and find a scholarship for it. So I'll say that much. But I think I'm done with this rant. But if anyone has any questions or if they want to question me on something or, you know, skeptical of anything I said, leave it in the comments. I will answer them as long as you're nice. Stuff that if I don't answer something, it probably went into the hidden comments. And like I said, I don't check that because every time I checked some of that stuff there is kind of vile. So I'm not going to answer vile things, but anything and anything in good faith, I'll answer. Like I said, if you want to question me or skeptical of anything or just want to pick my brain a little bit, that's good stuff, guys. But I really want to harp on this thing about bullshit majors again because there's so much bad information online about it, and then even in school, people are getting given misleading information about bullshit majors. And again, the way I define it is it's a major that you don't need to get into the very field that you're studying. Criminal justice being the best example of that. So that's a bullshit major.